We are the CUBE Educational Systems Design Team, and today we will be presenting our online learning platform, Studium, a platform for simple communication between teachers and students. Our team is made up of 5 UX designers from the University of Waterloo. We mainly use Miro for whiteboarding, brainstorming, and doing our design sprints. Afterwards, we did our wireframes, mockups, and prototyping in Figma. To start off our process, we try to identify the different parts that make up an education system. Here's the diagram that we came up with. Several key factors came up, including the potential of online learning, the importance of getting around and organizing content, communication problems between profs, TAs, and students, and the importance of putting all these things together into one place. We used this preliminary research to organize our surveys and interviews into 3 main areas, which we felt were the most important. These include content, communication, and organization, and how students and profs feel about the current tools that they are using. From our research, we found out that 75% of students say that they could not properly communicate with profs or peers through their learning applications. And 75% of these prefer live lectures as well. Students use multiple learning platforms and are unable to sustain individual conversations with their instructors. We also created 5 personas, each with their own specific pain points, to solidify our research. Andrew, a first-year student who has a hard time making new friends since his classes are mostly online. Naomi, a first year who is overwhelmed with how many platforms she has to use. Ivy, a first year who has trouble engaging with content and reaching out to peers as well. Robert, a professor who feels like there is a missing connection with students. And Ronald, who feels limited to using certain platforms that doesn't fulfill his needs for organizing or notification. And so we ask ourselves, how might we help solve communication and organization, especially for extreme users like first-year university students, through an online learning system? This is why we created Studium. Studium is an all-in-one online learning platform with many features. First of all, for our branding, we made use of Studium, which is the Latin word for study. Our brand values include accessibility, ease and organization, assisting students and professors through an all-in-one platform. Our logo makes use of the letter S divided into 4 shapes, with our 4 primary colors consisting of purple, beige, and 2 shades of blue. For our design sprint process, we made use of empathy maps for each of the personas that we made earlier, and we also created Crazy 8s to come up with better ideas for the features we want to have. Afterwards, we created a simple user flow to begin our wireframes. And here is what our wireframes look like. We have a home page on top, as well as content, and we have communication features at the bottom. We also wireframe how we were going to do color coding, the calendar, appointment booking, and a few other wireframes. For prototyping, these are the features that we have made, including an editable homepage. We implemented the courses into the sidebar for easy access. Color-coded tags sort and edit through the announcements, and notes and deadlines are visible on the right sidebar for students to customize. We also created a schedule a meeting feature and a highlight on top of each course for which professors and TAs are currently online. This makes sure that students can always access help when they need it. All announcements use a respective flare and are now linked from the homepage to their respective Dropbox, quiz, discussion, or page. And modules are now visual using cards. Finally, for the content page, we implemented comment section as well as a transcript for accessibility. We also implemented the color-coded calendar with class schedule, office hours, and upcoming deadlines located in the sidebar, and vid and call features within the website, so students can access both their lectures and reach out to their community in under one platform. After doing all this, we created a usability test, and we learned a lot about how our users really appreciate these organizational features like the tags and the deadlines. The content was much easier and more streamlined to find as well. However, we have to make various improvements, and here are a few of them. First of all, schedule a meeting was not as accessible or clear as we hoped it to be. Editing mode should have a different color so users should know when they're editing. Deadlines should link to their respective page as well, sort of similar to the announcements. Move the vid and call icons from the nav bar on top, which is not as visible, to underneath each respective course, and fix a few interactions and UI choices with text and color. We are the CUBE Educational Systems Design Team again, and this is Studium, an online learning platform for simple communication between teachers and students. Thank you very much for listening.
Hello, my name is Sasha Taku, and I was on the Accessible Education Design team. And so for me, this was one of my first experiences with UX design and working in a team project. And so I learned a lot from this project. First of all, I didn't have a lot of experience with different platforms like Figma and Miro, so I was able to see how technology can really help improve UX design in terms of like being able to actually make mock-ups. So that was a really important learning skill for me, but it was also a challenge because I had never used these things before, these platforms before, so it was quite challenging to try to learn Figma, to learn Miro. And so I hope that this acts as a good platform for me to develop, especially Figma skills, because I think Figma is definitely the platform that's quite difficult. But it was also a highlight because when I finally was able to see the finished mock-up on Figma, I was really surprised by the power of what we as UX designers can do and also the power of the tool itself. Another challenge for me, I'd say, would be learning the UX design process because I am completely new to UX design. Everything is new. So I was able to learn a lot about the steps you need to take as a team to get the final product. And I hope to take that with me into further projects, especially if it's a project where I'm working with students who are also new to UX design. I hope that together I can give some insight due to my participation in this project.
Hey there, my name is Devlin. I'm the Accessible Education Design team lead for this term, and I'm here to show you exactly what we did this term. So we started out with a Meet the Team session where each team member created their own individual profiles so we could understand their strengths, their weaknesses, as well as what program they were from. Then we moved on to a Mind Align exercise. This allowed us to understand the exact definition of what accessible education meant to everybody and what problems existed in the accessible education realm that we were passionate about. In the end, we decided to focus on accreditation as well as time zone differences, where accreditation was our primary issue and time zone differences was our secondary issue. We then looked into user selection. So after we selected accreditation as well as time zone differences for our problems, we then moved to decide exactly what types of users would be affected. In the end, we decided to focus on new immigrants and refugees. Then we had to find users. Now, during this stage, we researched where we could find users for our survey, and our original focus was on refugees and immigrants, but we had to shift our focus to international students in UW co-op programs. This was because it was going to be very difficult to reach out to our original intended user group. We then moved into our surveys. We created a survey originally consisting of over 8 questions. After talking to Chelsea, we narrowed down our users' questions to about 5, just so it would be a bit shorter for people to take on. And in the end, we only received about 14 responses, and most were not from international students within the co-op programs at Waterloo, which was kind of disheartening. Only 4 of the 14 people who completed the survey actually fit within our target user group. But they did provide us with a fair amount of information, so that's good. Then we had our interviews. So basically we created an interview script containing a few thought-provoking questions. Unfortunately, we were only able to do 1 interview, but we did get a fair amount of information from that 1 interview. Then we moved on to the empathy mapping part of our term. So we basically took all the information that we had gathered and put it into an empathy map. We then took the pain points from that empathy map and moved them into the core 4. This allowed us to look at the problems from a very general perspective and breaking it down into its 4 core elements. We then took these 4 core elements and brought them over to our lightning demos. Our lightning demos allowed us to look for a variety of different types of products that already existed that solved the specific problems that our user was already facing. This gave us a bit of inspiration moving forward. We then did our core 4 idea storm, where we came up with a variety of different ideas, such as different features that our application could include. We also narrowed those ideas, all the ideas that we sprawled out, under the different core 4 that we had established within the core 4 exercise, so we could easily understand where they fit into the scheme of things moving forward. We then selected 4 ideas, 1 for each core 4. We then moved to the 3-step wireframing phase, in where we took the 4 ideas that we had established from the Core 4 Idea Storm and created 3-step wireframes, which were basically miniature user flows. This allowed us to visualize what our experience could be like for these Core 4 ideas that we had come up with. We then moved into the Flow Map V1, where we looked at exactly how this application would run, generally giving a user flow from beginning to end, and kind of showcasing the different pathways that a user could take. We then moved into Flow Map V2, where we took the original map that we had, which we established was a very generic and kind of crazy outline of what we had, and we moved it into this new version of the flow map where we used a Kanban chart style, and we put the title of whatever the page was and then its various features, and then we connected those off with arrows into other parts of the application to showcase how, when you click or use a feature, how it would move to another section or another feature on another page, basically. Then we had a wireframe backlog, so we worked together to wireframe out the remaining screens that we required for a clear user flow that would showcase the purpose of our application. We then put these into a Kanban sort of chart in terms of not completed, in progress, and completed, so that the user interface designers could get their work done effectively and we could watch their progress as it unfolded. Then we had Prototype V1. The UI designers worked together to help make the application aesthetically pleasing and professional. They worked with a design system created by me to maximize their design potential and to save time. And then we moved into Prototype V2. Now, after some feedback from Chelsea, we realized that our design was actually not fully accessibility friendly because of the color contrast. So we modified that, moved some things around, changed the style, and now we have a nice purple application. So yeah, we decided to modify the design to make it as accessible as possible, and now it is AAA certified. All right, so we did face some challenges throughout this term. Specifically, narrowing down the topic effectively was really hard. Again, giving such a broad topic as accessible education it's very hard to just narrow it down to what exactly is at the core of accessible education because it can be interpreted in multiple ways. We talked to Chelsea, worked closely with her to change our target group from our primary user to our secondary user when we couldn't actually reach out to them. So it was kind of difficult to figure out exactly what our topic was. We also had trouble getting survey responses. This could have just because of lack of incentives, inability for people to understand exactly how the information was being used, and no clear vision of whether the feedback provided was actually going to be used at all. So that was probably the reason why. And it was also really hard to get those interviews, especially because we had busy students with time crunches, and it was kind of hard to do that. Then there were 3. So as not mentioned before, we actually had 4 team members, Chelsea and then myself. And we ended up down to 3 because one of our team members actually had to leave this term because they were really busy with their work. So I had to shift a bunch of the work over to the other 3 team members. I wanted to make sure that they weren't overwhelmed, so I took on some of the work as well, just to help offset the stress or pressure that they would have otherwise had to face with, again, like a full course load, plus having to deal with the Cube project at the same time. So I helped them along with that. And then, of course, there were too many features. We got sort of carried away. My original intention was to do a minimum viable product, to be as specific as possible with a very low amount of screens. We did end up doing that, but we did end up having originally a lot of different ideas. As you can see in the flow map, we had a bunch of different flows that we didn't really establish, but we needed to establish what the core flow was for our minimum viable product. So that's what we really need to focus on. And of course, the takeaways from this really comes in connection with our challenges, but really it's working with who you know. So really working closely with the students that we already knew rather than reaching out to a different group outside of our realms of expertise, specifically because of the limited time constraints and also just to make things a bit less awkward when we were reaching out to them. And of course, start small. Again, start with a very small idea, enable the key features, and don't get too caught up in the details about crazy amounts of features that you can use. And then, of course, wireframing in Miro versus Figma. We actually found that it was actually easier to wireframe in Miro because it didn't it meant that we weren't actually getting caught up in all the details about alignment and making sure everything was right and the colors and everything. Miro was just a really easy way to kind of drag and drop things and kind of test things out and see what they could look like. And it is a really simple media library instead of Figma, which Figma is great, don't get me wrong, but if you're unfamiliar with the actual way of how to use Figma, it can be quite challenging to actually wireframe on it. It can also be time consuming because people get caught up in the details for no reason, and that just wastes time. So that's what we did this term, a few challenges and takeaways, and now we'll move right along.
Hello, I'm Sandy. One of the biggest challenges I faced during my time working on the project was to learn the design aspect of it. I've never really worked with a design project before, and I was trying to design wireframes, and that was really challenging. But it was also a win. I learned so much from it, and especially because I had such a supportive team. We worked together on each step, and that helped us all learn new things, and which supported our growth. Going to this project, I wasn't really sure if I was capable of doing it because I've never worked with design before. But I learned that there are so many different steps for each project to be complete, and design includes all of these steps. So one takeaway I had is that every person brings such unique perspective to the group, and like in our case, every idea ended up being very valuable. So everyone should be encouraged to try something new, even when you think that you are different or you won't be able to do something because you're different. Especially when you're different, you need to try these stuff. My favorite part of working on the project was brainstorming the first initial idea. So we had to decide on a problem and then construct a project to solve it. That was really fun and interesting because we had to hear all of different people's perspective and views on accessible education. Overall, I'm really glad that I got to meet and work and learn from all of these talented people. Thank you.
All right, so let me give you a short walkthrough of our prototype. So we do have a general search bar that we would have to search through the jobs on our website. And then we have recommendations. Now this would only appear if you are actually signed into our website, and it's going to be based on things that you've looked at for in the past, your experience level, your location, things like that. So we go through and we have the position, the company, as well as the location. So general job search things. And then of course we go to learn more. So once you click learn more, you're going to have this side modal that's going to pop up. And basically what's going to happen is it's going to showcase the different tags that are going to be here. So whether it's full-time, you're going to have your annual salary, and as well as your hourly wage, if possible. And then of course, whether it's remote, whether it's not remote, if permanent residency is required, responsive employer, specifically the type of employer that they are, as well as whether a cover letter is recommended or whether it's not needed at all, as well as other tags that could be added later on. And then of course on the side here, you're going to have these quick links. So once you click on these, it's going to scroll down to the specific section of the text that will basically allow you to jump to different anchor points throughout this text block here. So you can go for our company, who we are, why should you work for us, learn more about us, that kind of thing. And then of course you have the ability to like and also to apply. And on the top here, you also have this, which would actually be a link to the company's page profile on our website that would actually indicate what the company is all about, what they value, what exactly they do, that kind of thing. And then we go to apply. So let's just say I was going to apply to this job. So you'd be brought to the application process. So you'd be given two different options. So let's begin. How would you like to apply? So you can apply with a profile or apply without a profile. Now in this case, because we have a profile, because we have a profile and we already have this set up, we're going to go and apply with profile. So once we apply with profile, it's going to ask you, how would you like to submit your resume? So you have three different options to upload your resume. You can upload a PDF, you can use a saved resume that you've had in the past. So any resume that you've actually submitted in the past, or any resume that you've started and saved, will be there for you to edit and to also apply with. And then of course, you can also create a new resume. So if I was to create a new resume, you have three other options. So you can have what type of resume template would you like to use. So there is going to be my templates, which is just general templates that you've saved in the past. So these could be generic templates. These could be really strong applications that you've saved in the past as templates, whatever. And then of course we have job specific templates. So these would be curated with us, and these would basically be applications that would be very specific to specific job titles. So whether it be UX designer, graphic designer, working in advertisement, working in marketing, working in finance, all of them kind of differ in terms of what exactly they're looking for a layout for that type of resume. So keep that in mind. So those are going to be the job-specific templates. And then, of course, you can also start from scratch. So in this case, this person has already filled this out. Mr. Sam Martin has already filled this out, but just to give you an idea. So we have keywords for the job posting, so it'll actually indicate exactly what types of keywords you've actually mentioned. So these are keywords from the job posting and how many times you've actually mentioned it in your resume. So it actually kind of pulls it out using its feature there. It kind of looks in and sees, okay, what things have they mentioned, how many times have they mentioned it, that kind of thing. Of course, this is just key when you're applying, but also just to make sure that you have all the required things and that they don't catch you off on, oh, they didn't mention this. So just important there. And then, of course, you have the CV elements, so you can drag these into the editor, and it will actually allow you to just drag and drop these into certain sections. And basically, when you create a profile, you upload your CV, which is basically, in our definition, is a full list of all the accomplishments or all the things that you've done in the past, education, work, all that. And basically, it's going to allow you to sift through and kind of pick and choose what kind of elements you have that you want in your resume. So you can pull those CV elements in here. So right now we have professional summaries. These are professional summaries that they've created in the past that they've actually saved onto here. So it allows you to save those. And of course, education. And then of course, we do have 3 different types of tabs here. So we have the basic editor, which is basically going to be a text editor. We have a style editor, which allows you to change the fonts, color, all that kind of jazz. And then we have the preview, which allows you to just see it without anything behind it. As well, you can change the name up here. And if you actually do go on these, again, we did not put this hover effect on here, but if you do hover over one of these, you can save these elements, and they'll actually save them into your CV elements so that you can use them in later applications. If it's something that you've modified slightly and you still want to have it available, you can always just save it and then save it in your education or whatever section for your CV elements, and then just re-pull it into any other resumes that you have. So these will always be available, and you can kind of just like go through them and see which ones make the most sense for you. And then of course you can save as a template. So if you wanted to, you can save this entire resume as a template, which is great. And then if you go on the top right here, you can also just save. So this would go into save resumes, just resumes that you've saved in the past that you just have access to, and you can access this through your profile, of course. And then of course, download as a PDF if you wanted to just download as a PDF to have a physical copy that you could give to somebody. Most things are digital right now, but just to give you an idea. And then of course, we have finish and continue application. So we're going to click finish and continue application. And this will pull you to your resume is ready. Now, in this section, it's basically just going to give you a tick mark to what this is, and we hadn't fully done this out yet, but basically what's going to happen is if you do hover over this, there's going to be a magnifying glass up here, and you could hover over it and it would actually do this full screen, so you could actually see your resume and just make sure you can double check everything prior to moving on. But for the sake of this prototype, we're going to move next. You don't need to apply with a cover letter if you don't want to. So in this case, we're going to say, no, you know what? I'm good. I don't need a cover letter. We're going to say no. And that is our prototype in a nutshell.
Hello, my name is Priyanna Langanason. I'm a member of the Accessible Education team, and this is my second term on CUBE. This term has been an incredibly educational and eye-opening experience for me. My biggest challenge this term was relearning how to use Figma in a more effective and organized manner. From the way I was originally taught how to use Figma, I've kind of chaotically placed shapes, symbols, and colors together. However, after prototyping alongside our team lead, I became aware of the tips and tricks that made the prototyping process much easier and organized in the long run. As we all have been taught, as a designer, you should always craft solutions with accessibility in mind. However, with accessibility being our main area of focus, we had to be extra critical of inclusivity and how a product would be perceived by all sorts of people. Chelsea, our mentor, and Devlin, our team lead, were incredibly helpful with guiding the team to design a useful and accessible prototype.
For example, after prototyping alongside Devlin, I learned the importance of utilizing accessible color schemes and fonts. Additionally, the weekly workshops Devlin hosted challenged our team to think beyond the surface throughout every step of the design process. For example, during the define phase of the design process, we did a workshop on Miro called Core 4, where we narrowed down the international students' pain points into 4 key sections. Overall, I felt like this term on Cube really pushed me outside of my comfort zone and challenged my creative problem-solving skills as well as my general design skills.